I paid €50 for an old safe at a scrap auction. I thought I'd find some old coins, maybe a few forgotten pieces of jewelry. But when I finally managed to open that rusted thing, what was inside completely changed everything I thought I knew about one of the richest families in Portugal. And the worst part? They don't want anyone to know about it. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've always been the kind of person who loves garage auctions, abandoned estate sales, that sort of thing. You know those TV shows where people buy locked storage units hoping to find treasure? That's exactly what I do on my weekends. But most of the time I find junk. Sometimes I find things worth a bit of money. But this time I found something I was never supposed to find. It was a Saturday morning in September last year. I went to an auction at an old property on the outskirts of Sintra. The house had belonged to a lawyer who died without direct heirs, and everything was being auctioned off to pay debts to the state. Nothing special. Old furniture, moldy books, the kind of stuff nobody wants. Then I saw the safe. It was an old model, heavy, completely rusted, the kind of safe you see in old movies. The lock was damaged, and no one had the combination. The auctioneer said it was probably empty, that the lawyer had surely opened it before he died. Bidding started at €20. No one bid. I raised my hand, it said 30. An elderly woman offered 40. I countered with 50. She gave up. €50 for a safe that was probably empty. My friends would say I'm crazy, and maybe they're the sensible ones. Getting that damn thing home was the first challenge. The safe easily weighed around 80 kilos. I had to call a friend to help load it into the van. He thought I had lost my mind. "Why do you even want that?" he asked as we struggled to lift it. "Curiosity," I said, and it was true. I just wanted to know what was inside, even if it was nothing. I spent the next 3 days trying to open the damn safe. First, I tried to find the combination online based on the model and manufacturer. Nothing worked. I tried techniques I saw on YouTube. Nothing. I considered calling a professional locksmith, but that would cost more than the €50 I'd paid. That's when I decided to do it the hard way. I bought an angle grinder at a hardware store and started cutting. It took hours. The noise was horrible. My neighbors must have thought I was dismantling a car inside my apartment. But eventually, after a lot of work and sparks, I managed to make a hole big enough to reach inside. It was dark. I carefully put my hand in, afraid to cut myself on sharp metal. My fingers touched something. Paper. Lots of paper. I pulled carefully. It was an old leather folder filled with documents yellowed by time. My heart started racing. I was finally going to find out what that dead lawyer had kept locked away. I opened the folder on my kitchen table. The first document I saw was a birth certificate from 1920. The paper was fragile, almost falling apart in my hands. I didn't recognize the name immediately, but there was a handwritten note in the margin, in faded ink. The true heir. I kept going through the documents. There were letters, contracts, more certificates, old black and white photographs. And the more I read, the more confused I became. Because the names in those documents, some of them I knew, not personally, of course, but from newspapers, television, Portuguese history. One family kept appearing again and again. I'll call them the Silva family for my own safety. The Silva family is known throughout Portugal. They own companies, properties, and political influence. They're billionaires. According to the official story, their fortune came from smart investments made by the family patriarch in the early 20th century, but the documents in front of me told a very different story. I'll explain what I found document by document because it's important to understand the full scope of this. First, there was the birth certificate I mentioned. It belonged to a man named Antonio Ferreira, born in 1895 in a poor village in the interior of Portugal. Nothing special, right? Wrong, because attached to that certificate was a letter dated 1923 written by Antonio himself. In it, he described how he had made his fortune in Angola during the coffee and diamond boom. He owned mines, plantations, and was becoming extremely wealthy. But here's the strange part.
Antonio Ferreira officially died in 1924. He drowned in a boating accident off the coast of Luanda. That's on record. It's history. His body was never found, but witnesses confirmed the accident. Case closed. Except it wasn't.
There was another letter in the folder, dated 1925, 1 year after Antonio's supposed death. It was written by his widow, Madalena Ferreira, and addressed to a lawyer in Lisbon. In the letter, she wrote, "I know my husband did not die in that accident. I know he was murdered, and that the documents of his fortune were stolen. I know who did it, but I am afraid. I have 2 small children. If I speak, they will kill us all. I need your help." The letter was signed, dated, and even had an official postal stamp from the time. It was real. I kept digging. There were more letters from Madalena, all addressed to the same lawyer. In the following letters, she described in detail what had happened. According to her, her husband had been poisoned by a business partner in Angola, a man named Joaquim Silva. Yes, Silva, the same surname as the billionaire family. Madalena wrote that Joaquim had planned everything. He poisoned Antonio during a business dinner, staged the boating accident, bribed witnesses, and then he took over all of Antonio's businesses, the mines, the plantations, everything. He altered documents, forged signatures, and within months, Antonio Ferreira's entire fortune was transferred to Joaquim Silva's name. Joaquim returned to Portugal in 1925 as a wealthy man. He invested in properties in Lisbon, bought companies, and built an empire. In that empire, it's the exact same empire the Silva family controls to this day. Generations later, they are still living off stolen money. But the letters didn't stop there. There was a series of correspondences between Madalena and the lawyer, who was clearly trying to help her prove what had happened. He had gathered evidence, found witnesses, and even obtained original documents from Angola proving that Antonio was the true owner of the businesses. The lawyer had built a solid case. He was ready to take it to court. And then, nothing. The last letter was dated 1926. After that, total silence. I researched the lawyer's name in historical archives. I found the answer in an old Lisbon newspaper from 1927. The lawyer had died. Suicide, according to the paper. He jumped from the roof of his office building. Depression, they said. Financial problems. But I knew the truth. He didn't kill himself. He was murdered, just like Antonio Ferreira. And Madalena and her children were probably threatened, or worse as well. I tried to find out what happened to Madalena Ferreira. I found almost nothing. She disappeared from records after 1927. No death certificate, no newspaper mentions, nothing. It was as if she had never existed. Her children, too, erased from history. I sat in my kitchen staring at those documents spread across the table and realized the magnitude of what I had discovered. I was holding proof that one of the richest and most powerful families in Portugal had built its fortune on murder, theft, and conspiracy, and had eliminated anyone who tried to expose the truth.
The question was, what was I going to do with this information? I thought about going to the police, but what would they do with documents that were almost 100 years old? Technically, everyone directly involved had been dead for decades. The crimes were long past the statute of limitations. There was no one left to arrest. I thought about going to the press, but would they believe me? Would they publish a story like this against such a powerful family, risking massive lawsuits? And even if they did publish it, wouldn't the Silva family have enough influence to bury the story? I spent days thinking about it. I photographed all the documents, made copies, stored them in different places, because if there's one thing I learned from this whole story, it's that people who know too much have a habit of disappearing. I decided to dig deeper. I wanted to confirm everything in those documents before doing anything. I started with Angola. I found colonial records online, documents archived in digital libraries, and I confirmed it. Antonio Ferreira really had owned diamond mines and coffee plantations in Angola. The property records were all there. I also confirmed the transfer of those properties to Joaquim Silva shortly after Antonio's death. But there was more. I found a detail the documents in the safe didn't mention. Joaquim Silva had a daughter, and she married a man from an old, respected Portuguese family. That marriage gave the Silva family even more legitimacy and power, and the descendants of that marriage, they are exactly the people who control the Silva empire today. I built a complete family tree. I followed the money through generations, and it became clear. Every euro, every property, every company the Silva family owns today can be traced directly back to that stolen fortune in 1924. But one mystery remained. How did these documents end up in the safe of a lawyer in Sintra? This lawyer wasn't the same one that died in 1927. He was too young for that. I researched the lawyer who owned the safe. His name was Dr. Manuel Costa. He died 2 years ago at the age of 78. He had been a lawyer his entire life, specializing in inheritance and property cases. He never married and had no children. I dug deeper. And then I found the connection.
Dr. Manuel Costa's father had also been a lawyer, and his name? It was the same name as the lawyer who had helped Madalena Ferreira in the 1920s. Suddenly, everything made sense. The original lawyer hadn't killed himself, or at least, before dying, he had managed to hide the documents. He passed the case on to his son, and his son, Dr. Manuel Costa, kept those documents hidden for his entire life, probably too afraid to do anything with them. Dr. Manuel carried that secret to the grave, and now that secret was in my hands. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep this to myself. People had died for this truth. Madalena Ferreira and her children deserved justice, even a century later. But I had to be smart. I couldn't just dump everything online and hope for the best. The Silva family has lawyers, money, and influence. They could destroy me in seconds. So I made a plan. First, I digitized all the documents, high-quality copies. Then I sent copies to 3 different people I trust, with instructions that if anything happened to me, they should publish everything online immediately. Then I wrote an anonymous email to an investigative journalist I respect. I didn't give many details, just said I had information about the origin of the Silva family's fortune. We arranged a meeting in a public cafe with lots of people around. I went to that meeting with a folder full of document copies. The journalist showed up. I showed him everything. I watched his eyes grow wider as he read the documents, looked at the photographs, and read Madalena's letters. "It's incredible," he said. "If this is true, it's the biggest story in Portugal this century." I said, "It's true. I have the originals. They're in a safe place." He wanted to publish immediately. I said no, not yet. We needed more confirmation, more context, more legal protection, because the moment this story went public, the Silva family would come after us with everything they had. Over the following months, we worked together. He used his contacts to verify every detail. We found historians who confirmed the authenticity of the documents. Handwriting experts verified the signatures. We even found a distant descendant of the Ferreira family who had heard vague stories about an ancestor who died under strange circumstances in Angola. We built a solid case, unbreakable. And then, 3 months ago, the story was published.
The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the story went viral. All major newspapers picked it up. Television, radio, everyone was talking about it. The Silva family released a statement denying everything, calling the story defamatory and threatening lawsuits. But it was too late. The truth was out there, and the more they denied it, the more people investigated. Other journalists launched their own investigations. More documents were found in archives. Historical testimonies ignored for decades suddenly made sense. Public pressure exploded. Politicians began calling for official investigations. Some younger members of the Silva family publicly distanced themselves from the family legacy. There were even suggestions that the fortune should be returned to the descendants of Antonio Ferreira. Several months have passed since this all began. The story is still unfolding,
Investigations are ongoing, lawsuits are happening on both sides. The Silva family is fighting tooth and nail to protect their reputation, but every day, new details emerge that confirm what those documents revealed. As for me, I still have the original documents. They're stored in a very safe place, far from me. I moved houses, changed some habits. I'm not paranoid, but I'm not stupid either. Families with this kind of power don't like being exposed. Was it worth it? Honestly, I don't know. Some days I wake up and wonder if I should have just left the safe closed. My life was simpler before. But then I remember Madalena Ferreira. I remember her letters, the fear in her words, the injustice she suffered. I remember that she tried to do the right thing and was silenced for it. She deserved to have her story told. Antonio Ferreira deserved the world to know he was murdered and robbed. Their children deserved to have their family legacy erased from oblivion. So yes, it was worth it, even if it cost me dearly. Because there are things more important than my personal peace. Things like truth, justice, and memory. And now, you know. You know that not all fortunes are built through honest work. You know that buried secrets can wait decades, even centuries, before coming to light. You know that sometimes an old safe bought at an auction for 50 euros can change everything. The next time you see a rich and powerful family, ask yourself, where did that money really come from? What's the story they don't want told? Because I guarantee you, almost always, there's a hidden story. That safe changed my life. It showed me that the history we're taught, the official history, is not always the complete one. There's always more. There are always secrets, and sometimes, whether by luck or bad luck, depending on how you see it, those secrets find us. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel.